I've been a biologist ever since I was about 22 years old. I grew up on a farm in rural Illinois, so nature has never been a stranger to me. Playing in the woods was how I entertained myself growing up. Spending all the time in the forest as a child, people expect to have some stories about Bigfoot or strange noises or finding some weird shrine out in the middle of the woods. But no. The weirdest thing that I have ever encountered was a bobcat screeching. It sounds just like a woman's dying scream. And yes, to everyone who's claimed to hear a skinwalker or a goatman screeching in the woods at night, I promise you it was just a bobcat. The truth is often mundane and disappointing. You'd think this would mean that I'd gotten bored of the woods, but I never really lost my love for them. Nature is boring. That's why I like it. You know what to expect. That's why after college I decided to make studying nature my full-time career. I'm a biologist in the Sierra Club, specialization in the ecosystems of the Midwestern American fish, birds, deer, elk, bear, wolves, and the like. I've spent weeks in the fire towers, cabins, campsites, always miles away from civilization. I'm usually gathering data on local wildlife, measuring the pollutants, determining whether the ecosystem is stable or if anything threatens it. The work is not glamorous, but I enjoy it, and nature has still never surprised me. Until my last assignment. I was designated to be stationed alone in a cabin in the Ozarks. The assignment was supposed to last 3 weeks in May. The Sierra Club was alerted to be a steady decline in the local elk population over the last decade. Nothing drastic, but enough to raise concern. My job was to take census of this wildlife, measure the pollutants, the usual. These are my diary entries for my assignment, starting back with my first night. I arrived in the evening in early May. Nothing was amiss the first 2 nights. It seemed like an assignment like any other. The sound of the forest were exactly what you would expect. Crickets and owls hooting and the occasional elk call. I was sent here in May because that's the mating season. The elks are out and about for, dates, and that makes them easy to count. Elk mating is pretty straightforward. The female lets out a call and waits for the male to find her. Usually it's first come, first served, if you catch my drift. If only, right? It was clear that love was in the air, and for all the calling, you'd think that you would start seeing an elk. But by the second day, I still hadn't spotted a single one. The third night I was lying awake in bed, uneasy. Something wasn't sitting right, but I couldn't put my finger on it, onto why. I was about to nod off when a female call cut through the night. I sighed. That was the second time that night that I'd heard her. What, are the fellas having a guy's night or something? And that's when it finally hit me. I shot bolt upright in my bed. For the last 3 nights, I'd heard nothing but a female mating call. That should have drawn every male within half a mile. Now, elk are discreet and they don't beat around the bush. When that male gets to that female, well, let's just say that the whole forest will definitely know about it. I sat in bed, staring out into the night, pondering. There have to be at least a male close to hear her call. So, after 3 nights of her call, why haven't I even heard the main event? The third day, I went out onto this trail, once again looking for any signs of an elk in this forest. What I found was not encouraging. About a quarter mile from my cabin, I was trekking down this trail when I noticed something 30 feet into the woods. A large, brown, fuzzy mass lying in the bush. I smiled, an elk taking a midday nap. I took out my binoculars to get a closer look. It was an elk, all right, but my smiling dropped when I realized that the brown fuzzy mass was completely still. I carry a hunting rifle with me for safety. I readied it and approached the elk carefully. It looked fine from where I was standing, but I nearly dropped my rifle when I rounded the animal's front. It was carnage. The poor creature had been completely gutted. What little remained of the entrails hung loosely out of the chest cavity. The ribs had been pulled apart, huge claw marks scarred in its flank. I heaved and almost lost my little bit of breakfast that I did have. It was horrifying. I had to take a few moments to collect myself. This was the first time that nature had surprised me. What could have possibly done this? I've studied wildlife for years. This was a bull elk in its prime. It would have stood 9 feet tall alive, a king of this forest. There is no predator on this continent that could have taken down a fully grown bull. Pack or no pack. Even a grizzly wouldn't mess with one of these things because of how big it is. And bears are mostly scavengers anyways. My mind raced through different possibilities, trying to think of an explanation. Maybe it had been sick. Maybe a predator came along while it was asleep and took it by surprise. Yes, that must be it. It couldn't have fought back. But this savagery, those claw marks were bigger than even a grizzly. And its ribs. No quadruped could have even exerted leverage on the ribs and split it like that. You would need arms. A chilling thought occurred to me. A human? Could humans have done this? But why? Hunters would skin it, or take the head at least, to mount on their walls. Some psychopath out here dismembering wildlife for fun? And that still wouldn't explain those gruesome claws. Whatever it was, it needed to be reported. I was sent here to investigate the elk population declining, and this had to be related. I fished out the camera to take photos. Having to document this horror from every angle was heart-wrenching. The look in its eyes. This elk had been terrified when it died. I wanted to take the last shot. Just as this shutter clicked, my ears registered something. The sound from behind me that my camera had nearly drowned out. I whipped around. I had barely heard it, but there it was. A twig snapping. My camera hung from my neck, and my rifle from my shoulder. I dropped the one to snatch up the other. Idiot, I thought to myself as I pointed this rifle towards the sound. I had been so shaken up by the sight of this body, I had completely overlooked one important fact. The kill was fresh. This corpse hadn't even begun to decay. This elk had been dead for no more than half a day, and that means whatever killed it may still be nearby. With my rifle still trained on the spot, I backed away towards the trail. My hike back to the cabin was the only time in my life that I felt scared of this forest. Trees surrounding me on all sides, no visibility. I jumped at the slightest sounds, never lowering my rifle, never going more than 5 seconds without looking behind me. I felt like prey, never knowing where this danger would even come from, or when. I didn't relax until my cabin door was closed and locked behind me. I spent the rest of my day inside that cabin, shaken. I readied the photos and sent them to my supervisor. They would take a day or two to respond. Until then, my plans was to investigate during the day and with my rifle ready. That night was my last night at that cabin. I was getting ready for bed. I heard a female elk call again. The first one I had heard that day. And close. Very close. Wildlife don't like buildings. They smell of fire and Madeleine gasoline, all unnatural to them. They steer clear. What was this elk doing so close to my cabin? I peered out of my window, into the dark of the forest. No sign of her. She must have been beyond the tree line. I grabbed my rifle. Of course I wasn't going to shoot an elk, but I might need a few shots to put into the air to scare her off. It would be nice to know the elks are breeding normally, but I could do without front row seats. I unlocked my cabin and took 2 steps out, onto this porch, rifle still in hand. My eyes scanned the tree line, looking for the female. That's when a pair of antlers struck out from behind the tree. An elk's head followed them and turned, peered right out at me. But this was a buck, probably attracted by the female's call. This was promising, but all the more reason to scare them away. I raised my rifle to the sky and prepared to fire. That was when an elk flew into the air, or its head did. The buck's head sailed in the arc towards me and only landed a few feet away from my door. I stood there in shock, trying to process what had just happened. Something or someone had been holding the head, and they had just thrown it. I nearly pissed myself in fear. I pointed my rifle at the tree where the buck's head had been. The light from my cabin barely reached, where my eyes started playing tricks on me. Had I just seen claws retreat from around the trunk? That was frozen. I needed to reach behind me and open my door and get back inside, but I was too scared to turn back to the forest, or even take a hand off my rifle. After a few seconds, I finally gathered up the nerve to brace my rifle against my shoulder, my fingers still on the trigger. I groped behind me until my left hand found the doorknob, never taking eyes off this tree. Thank God this door had not locked behind me. With my left hand, I turned the knob and pushed open the door, then drew it back to my rifle. I backed away quickly into the cabin, slamming the door and locking it. I hurried to the windows, drawing all of my blinds, making sure each was locked, never letting my rifle out of my arm. The terror I felt as I approached each window, never knowing if there would be someone or something on the other side of that glass, staring back at me. There hadn't been, which was almost as unnerving. I rushed to the satellite phone to call the sheriff's office at the base of this mountain. The relief I felt when they picked up. "You need to get up here," I pleaded. "Who's this?" It was the sheriff's deputy on the other side of this phone. I'd met him and the sheriff before beginning my stay in this cabin. "It's me, I'm the guy stationed up at the cabin in the mountains." "Oh, sorry about that. Well, what's the problem?" "There's someone up here fucking with me. Get up here now." Whoa, slow down. You mean like kids or something?" "No, it's not fucking kids. Someone is up here. They just threw a decapitated elk head at my fucking cabin." In my panic, I'd somehow kept awareness to use the phrase someone instead of something. I didn't want this guy to think that I was drunk or something. I just needed him to get up here. "Well, what did they look like? How many were there? Do they have guns?" "I have no fucking idea, man. They killed a goddamn elk, cut the fucking head off, and threw it at my cabin. Just get the hell up here." "Oh, shit. Okay. Lock yourself in there. I'll be on my way." "Man, please stay on the line. I'm fucking scared." I really was terrified. I wanted someone to stay on the phone with me, even if it couldn't help me. The man replied, "I can get to you and stay on the line at the same time. I'm calling the sheriff now. We're on our way. Just lock yourself in there." The man hung up. I swore. I was alone again. The female elk rang out again. This time it was even closer. It sounded like it was right outside of the door. I took up my rifle again. That's when the tapping started. While I was talking to the deputy, I hadn't been watching the windows. The sound was coming from the windows to the right of my door. My eyes widened in horror. The single gray claw tapping on the right edge of this window. Just one claw. Whatever it was attached to wanted to stay out of sight. The claw stopped tapping. Instead, it drew itself along the window and out of my sight, leaving a long, ugly scratch. The sound was horrible, but it didn't stop when it left the window. I could still hear it, dragging along the wooden walls of my cabin. The creature was scratching through solid wood. Could it break through my windows? Why didn't it? My knees shook. I tracked the sound of the scratching with my rifle. My mind raced. Could this thing get in? How long until this fucking sheriff showed up? I was high up on the mountain. The drive up here was about 45 minutes. Even if they hurried, it might be half an hour. Even if they did get here, could they stop this thing? Should I make a run for my truck? No. Whatever that thing was, it could get me before I get into my truck. Something nagged in the back of my head, but I could barely think. The scratching was louder and louder. Whatever this thing was, it had torn a bull elk to shreds. How could I stop it? The bull. That's when I realized it. The head. It was the same head as the bull I'd seen earlier. It had the same scar down its right cheek. This thing was taunting me. It must have been there when I found the elk. It had been watching me, and now it had thrown the head at me. Was it telling me to go away? To get out of its territory? I gasped, with my mind racing. I hadn't noticed that the scratching had stopped. Where was that thing? My eyes darted from window to window. No sign of it, until the loud thud right above me. It's on the goddamn roof, I thought. Its footsteps echoed through the cabin. Between each step came rhythmic taps, no doubt from its claws. Was it testing for weakness? Was it merely toying with me? It had only been a few minutes since I had called the sheriff's office. I was still far from safety. I had moved since this call. The thing on my roof thudded from spot to spot. The shock was starting to wear off. Focus. Think, I told myself. The thing had probably seen me through my window. It was right above me. The bathroom. The bathroom was the safest spot. There were no windows. If it does break in, it will have to look for me, then break through the bathroom door. That might buy me a little extra minute. It might save my life. The creature knew where I was. I had to try to change that. I slowly slipped off my shoes, keeping my rifle trained to the roof. I kicked a shoe towards the bed. Sure enough, the thud on my roof followed, stopping right above the spot where my shoe had landed. It's tracking me. I slowly shuffled to the bathroom, not raising my feet, afraid to make any sound, praying that the door would not creak. I opened the door, preparing to lock myself inside. I was shutting myself in, hoping that I wouldn't die in this bathroom, when I heard a loud scratch followed by a dull thud. It had jumped off the roof. It was on the ground again, outside of the cabin. Why was it going away? I was afraid to hope that maybe it had gotten bored. Maybe it had found some other prey. That was when I heard a woman scream. I gasped and covered my mouth. How was that possible? No one else is up here. A hiker? A camper, maybe? The scream came again. She cried for help. I gripped my rifle, crying now. I was frozen in fear. The thing was out there, chasing some poor woman, and I was too cowardly to even help her. I just wanted to stay in that bathroom, hiding, hoping that every second that thing spent chasing that woman, another second was closer for that sheriff getting here. I don't know how long I sat there, cowering, another more desperate scream, just continuing. There was something in her terror. She was more scared than I was, and there I sat, letting her die. My shame overcame my fear. I gripped my rifle tight and left the bathroom. I marched to the door, ready to face whatever this creature was. Maybe I could distract it, buy some time for her to get away. Maybe the sheriff would find her, even if this thing got me first. Just as I was reaching for the doorknob, she cried out again, a pain, dying scream. I was too late. The thing had gotten to her. I was a coward, and because of that, she was dead. The woman moaned in pain, this time just a few meters away from my door. This must have been her final moments, and I listened, safe in my cabin. She groaned once more, but this sounded different somehow. It was. My eyes widened in shock and realization. I drew up my hand from the doorknob as if it had burned me. I had never unlocked it. Thank God. The moan came again, this time unmistakable. That was not the moan of pain or terror. It was an entirely different kind of moaning. I backed up from the door. You motherfucker, I muttered. You almost got me. You almost fucking got me. It all made sense now. There never was any female elk. Mimicries is common adaptation in all ecosystems, but for prey and the predators, this thing, it let out a female elk cry to draw in males. And then, well, I had already seen the result in the forest. That's why I never heard any other elks mating. There was no female waiting for them, only this monster, and now it was trying to use the same tactic on me. I nearly sobbed in terror, and it had tried to lure me with the sound of a woman in distress. It thought I might draw out. When that didn't work, it switched to its tried and true method, a mating call. I aimed my rifle at the door. The moans continued getting louder and more intense, building into a climax. I was nauseous at the thought of whatever it was out there, squatting in the dark, mouth agape, emitting a preservation of a woman's voice, trying to draw me out into the dark and rip me apart like that elk. I stood with my rifle trained at the door, not moving. I had resolved that I was going to stand there until the sun rose, or until the sheriff came, and the moment I saw the thing, I was going to fucking shoot it. I don't know how long I stood there among the echoes of the sick creature. Eventually, the moans puttered out, and I was left in silence, until the tapping began again, in the same spot as before. There it was, the same gray claw, tapping on the same spot, on the scratched glass. But then a second claw joined it, then a third. It drummed them along the glass, slowly, ever so slowly. A patch of gray fur poked out from the edge of the window. Time stopped. The creature brought its face into full view. It was terrible, like a sloth, but its mouth and nose were caked in blood. It had tiny beady eyes, front-facing, a predator's eyes, large, pointed ears, almost like a bat, thin, cracked lips. This monster looked right into my eyes. It cocked its head, and then it pulled those terrible, bloody lips into a smile, its razor-sharp teeth still stained with blood and flesh. I'll never forget them. It pointed that hideous grin at me as it drummed those claws on my window. Shoot, 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 I told myself. But I was frozen. This thing was going to kill me. Light poured through the front window. The monster disappeared out of sight. The sheriff and deputy had arrived in their truck. The two of them sauntered up to the front porch and knocked. I had to shake myself out of my stupor and open this door. Both of them backed off and drew their weapons at me, screaming for me to put my gun down. I was still in shock. I think the only thing that really kept them from shooting me was the terrified look in my eyes. They asked me what the hell was going on. I could barely speak. I just kept frantically repeating the same thing, that we needed to get inside, that it was still out here. They eventually told me to come with them, down to this police station. At first, I refused to leave this cabin. They sort of half-dragged, half-walked me to the truck. They said that I was like an owl the whole ride down. My head was on swivel, always scanning the trees, looking for it. I must have fallen asleep after I got to the station. I woke up the next morning in a cell. I was confused and disoriented. I nearly wept from fear when I finally remembered everything that I had been through that night before. The sheriff and the deputy had sat me down in a room and asked me what the hell had happened that night. I was silent at first. I didn't know what to tell them. If I told them the truth, they'd just think that I was crazy. They asked me about the Elks hat that I had told them about during the call. It was gone when they got there, just a bloody blood stain on the ground where it had been lying. I made up a story, said that some kids prowling around my cabin, making noise, trying to scare me. I called the sheriff's office because I thought that someone was out there with a gun. The sheriff only made me go over the story once. He seemed satisfied. He took me back up there the next day to collect my stuff. In broad daylight, of course. Sure enough, there were deep scratches and marks along the entire side of the cabin. The sheriff didn't look at me. "Kids," he said. We collected my things quickly and hurried back down the mountain. I reported to my supervisors that it was probably overhunting causing the population to decline. They would never believe the truth. The sheriff saw me off while I was waiting for the bus to take me back home. He shook my hand and drew me in for one of them manly half-hugs. He gripped my shoulder. "Don't come back," he whispered. I gave him a confused look, and he stared right at my eyes. "It knows you now, has your scent, seen your face, heard your voice. You got away once. It won't happen again. So don't ever fucking come back." That was a year ago. I burned the clothes that I had worn with that trip, so there was no way they'd end up near the Ozarks again. Never been back anywhere near the Ozarks, and anyone who's ever even asked me, I always tell them to steer clear. I've spent so much time trying to forget what I had saw that night. But that face, I remember every detail. It's kept me up so many nights, with so many questions. What the hell was it? Some freak of nature? A mutant of somehow survived past infancy? Something supernatural, an alien? Those ears, perfectly crafted to detect minute sounds. Just like a bat. That explains the mimicry. They grew up in the forest, hearing the outcaws. After a while, it learned to copy them. I've spent so many nights asking myself, how? How did it make a woman's voice? I dread to ponder that answer. When sleep finally comes, I have nightmares. Nightmares about campers sitting around this fire, when all of a sudden they hear a voice calling out from the woods, crying for help. The voice in my nightmares, calling them into the darkness of the trees, away from the safety of the fire. And that voice is mine. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you would like to see more, make sure to like, comment, and if you're new to the channel and like what you heard, make sure to subscribe. Got a lot of content, a lot more coming, trust me. Make sure to check out the links in the description as well, Twitter, Instagram, yada yada, you know. And also, submit your stories if you have one, pretty please. But with that being said, stay safe, stay scary, and I'll see you in the next one.